1244, Culm, in the Teutonic state of Prussia. The Teutonic Knights have just been defeated in a major battle against the pagan Prussians. Martin von Gallen is a young boy whose family had moved into Culm as settlers in the Teutonic state. Now, the Teutonic Knights, defeated, are powerless to protect the Christian settlers. The pagan tribesmen descend upon Culm, burning the farmlands and gathering up the people as slaves. Martin and his family are among those captured. As Martin and his family are being marched off into the Prussian wilderness, Martin's older sister, who is pregnant, is unable to keep up the pace. The Prussian warriors drag the girl out of the line and kill her right there in front of young Martin. It's a moment that will come to define Martin's life. Five years later, a large German crusade arrives in Prussia and annihilates the Prussian tribe that had captured Martin's family. Young Martin, by now a teenager, is liberated. He returns to Christian territory with a new resolve. He's decided to dedicate his life to fighting pagans. As a slave, Martin gains skills that are valuable to the Teutonic Knights. He has insider knowledge about the customs and habits of the Prussian tribes, and he speaks several Prussian dialects. During the 1250s, Martin serves in several Crusader armies. By 1260, he is serving in Culm, along the most dangerous frontier in the Teutonic state. He is a scout for the brothers, who garrison the fortress of Raiden. From the start, it's apparent that Martin is a warrior of unusual skill. He's remarkably strong and shows much endurance. He's also intensely dedicated, undeterred by danger, distance, or discomfort. Although young, he is a man with a dark mission: revenge. During this early period, Martin is out on patrol with a Teutonic brother deep in the wilderness. They encounter a campsite occupied by 5 Prussians. Spurring their horses, Martin and the brother make a break for it, while the Prussians pursue them. Attempting to escape, Martin and the brother dismount and send their horses off running, while they themselves try to sneak away through the underbrush. But the ruse fails. The Prussians capture Martin and his companion. While 3 of the pagans set off to catch the horses, the others stay to guard over the prisoners. After a while, the guards decide to just kill the prisoners and take their valuables. As they're about to behead Martin, Martin speaks up in Prussian. "Don't kill me like this. My shirt is very valuable. Take it off first, so you don't get blood on it." The Prussians, laughing, thank him for the advice, then proceed to unbind him so they can strip him. As soon as his hands are free, Martin punches one Prussian in the throat, dropping him instantly. He grabs the man's sword and hacks both pagans to death. After freeing the Teutonic brother, Martin and his companion stalk the remaining 3 Prussians, leaping upon them as they're leading back the horses. All 3 Prussians are slain. Martin and the brother loot the campsite, then return to the fortress of Raiden. Over the years, Martin becomes famous in the Prussian wars. He leads a band of rugged frontiersmen, Germans, Slavs, and converted Prussians, with names like Conrad the Devil and Kudar the Sadovian. They hunt through the wild borderlands. They ambush military parties and villages, bringing back much booty in loot and prisoners to the Teutonic brothers. Martin is soon widely feared among the Prussian tribes, and tales of his exploits are recounted gravely around many a Prussian campfire. By 1286, Martin is around 50 years old and receives intelligence from Königsberg. A young pagan nobleman is angry about one of his kinsmen who has robbed him of his inheritance. The young pagan informs the Teutonic Knights about his kinsman's plans for a wedding. The knights dispatch Martin to make the attack. Martin takes 20 experienced raiders and sets out with the young pagan, who leads them straight to the wedding party. There, they find some 70 pagan nobles in a state of festive drunkenness. Mercilessly, Martin and his men set upon them, slaying men left and right, and rounding up the women and children to be taken back as captives. Finally, Martin comes upon the young bridegroom lying asleep with his bride in his arms. The chronicler recounts that he would have preferred to just leave them be on their wedding day, but not Martin. With a horrible cry, Martin awakens them, ties them up, and leads them off as captives with the others. Meanwhile, Martin's companions collect all the costly wedding presents to be hauled back as booty. Martin never retires. Rather, as an old man, he raids even deeper into pagan territory. At last, he dies as he lived, violently, around 1295, amid a raid on the distant Bug River. Martin's life offers insight into the grim clashes between pagan and Christian that raged across the Prussian wilderness in the 13th century. Traumatized by the early horrors inflicted upon his family, Martin himself became much the thing he initially hated. However, historian William Urban points out that Martin's legend earned a certain amount of respect among the pagans themselves, much as the Christians came to respect the valiant Prussian chieftain Skumond. In these horrible and brutal battles, warriors often developed an appreciation for the valor of an enemy. And yet, these conflicts are a stark reminder of human cruelty, which can shatter innocence and leave a legacy of bitter violence. East of the Vistula River, thick forest covered most of the land from the Baltic coast to the western Russian highlands. Much of this territory was impenetrable. Miles of dead wood, dense undergrowth, swamps, lakes, and hills limited human settlement to the coast and the river valleys. Grazing ground was hemmed in by dense woods of maple, elm, oak, linden, and ash. Bison, bear, elk, and the now extinct aurochs roamed the wilderness. Like the Lithuanians to their east, the medieval Prussians were Balts. By 1100, they had been in the region some 3,000 years. Linguists have identified long-enduring words related to bees, horses, and wagons, disproving the notion that Baltic culture was primitive. Nevertheless, Prussian society was far behind Christian Europe in many areas. Feudal structures were essentially non-existent, dramatically limiting the capacity of the Prussians to unify for the purpose of defense, commerce, or agriculture. Prussian territory stretched along the Baltic coast to the Vistula River in the southwest. Eleven tribal groups dominated 11 regions. The Samlanders and the Sudovians were the most warlike and powerful of these. Historians today estimate that medieval Prussia, as the Teutonic Knights found it, contained around 170,000 people. They built forts in which they could settle during wartime, and though these structures were nothing like the castles of the Christians, they were nevertheless adequate. Prior to the Northern Crusades, the various Prussian tribes were never known to act as one. Prussian religion was an offshoot of Indo-European nature worship, comparable to early Greek, Roman, Celtic, and Germanic folkways. Contact with Vikings and Christians had influenced Prussian ideas. In the 10th century, Western missionaries began interacting with the Prussian tribes, but to little effect. However, the remoteness of Prussian territory discouraged travelers and invaders alike. "Let us leave the Prussians with the brute beasts," wrote the first chronicler of Poland in the 12th century. The ruling class among the Prussians was their warrior elite. The clans organized communal life, assembled armies, and dispensed justice. Historian William Urban states that newborn females were often abandoned, and so Prussian women were rare, allowing fathers to command a high bride price. Nevertheless, polygamy was practiced, and high-ranking males kept multiple wives. It was not uncommon for Prussian warriors to raid neighboring lands for women. The Prussian nobles bathed regularly in sauna-like structures. German chroniclers report that they did not spice their foods and did not sleep in soft beds. Their houses were scattered throughout the woods, surrounded by their fields, always close to a log fort for refuge. The weapons wielded by the average Prussian warrior were quite poor. Clubs and stones could be effective in ambushes, but they were virtually useless in pitched battle against enemies with horses, armor, and swords. Such arms were available to the Prussian nobility, who functioned as light cavalry with spears, swords, helmets, and mail shirts. This was inferior to the equipment of the average Western knight, but it was effective in the swampy lowlands and rugged hills of the Prussian territory. William Urban doubts that Prussian nobles would have adopted Western military gear, even if it were available to them. The Prussian warrior nobility lived off hunting, warfare, and the labor of slaves. Women and children taken in raids were pressed into household service, used as concubines, or sold in regional slave markets. Men were considered useless as slaves, since they could easily escape while working in the small forest clearings. Women were viewed as the ideal laborers. Slave raids were cited by Christians in Poland and Pomerania as the primary reason for waging war against the pagan Prussians. Some modern writers have dismissed this as an excuse for aggressive expansion, but it's far more realistic to recognize the complexity of the issue. Christian regions were driven both by an interest in conquest and a desire to eliminate Prussian slave raids. Similar motivations would bring Germans from the Holy Roman Empire into the conflict. For the Teutonic Knights, stern warrior monks, Christianization of the region was a keen motivating factor in entering the Prussian Crusade. 1197. A force of German crusaders arrives in the Holy Land. There, they find that the Order of the Hospital of St. Mary of the Germans, established only a few years earlier during the Third Crusade, is flourishing, caring for the ill and providing lodging for pilgrims. Many of the brothers of the Order are trained knights who have abandoned a military life for a religious vocation of helping the sick and the poor. However, the Christian states on the coast of Syria and Palestine, facing the powerful Saracen Ayyubids to their east, suffer from a chronic shortage of fighting men. The German crusaders conclude that the Brothers of the Hospital of St. Mary should begin taking on military duties. The Holy Roman Emperor, Henryk VI, believes that a German military order will help focus and maintain German interest in the Holy Land. In 1197, Henryk sends a request to Pope Celestine III to reincorporate the German hospital as a military order. The Pope agrees, issuing the order a new charter. In 1198, a new military order is born, essentially a German incarnation of the heavily French Knights Templar. This order, the Brothers of the German House of St. Mary, is better known to the world as the Teutonic Knights. The Teutonic Knights model themselves closely after the Templars, adopting their rule virtually word for word. The rule is written down in German so that all members can understand it easily. Although they retain their hospital function, they are now primarily a military organization. Their membership is dominated by knights who require horses, weapons, equipment, and support staff. Like the Templars, they devote themselves to celibacy, poverty, and obedience, as well as to the cause of the crusade. They are fighters, warriors who will ride into battle against the enemies of Christendom. The earliest history of the Teutonic Knights is obscure. Although they possess a few estates in the Holy Land, the early death of Henryk VI in 1197 leaves the order small and obscure for many years. During their first decade of existence, no more than 24 fully fledged brother knights occupied their ranks. It's in 1210, on the election of Hermann von Salza as the Order's Grand Master, that their history as a major force in the Crusades begins. Hermann von Salza is one of those rare men of equal vision and ability. His origins are humble. His family is of the ministeriale class, that is, knightly, but not quite noble. Generations before, one of Hermann's ancestors raised the family's status through valor, competence, or both. Hermann's birth could prevent him from rising through the ranks of the Templars or the Hospitallers, but a small order like the Teutonic Knights presents him with clear opportunity. There, his affable personality and keen organizational abilities immediately stand out. While still in his 30s, he's elected Grand Master. In 1215, the new Holy Roman Emperor, Friedrich II, names Hermann a Prince of the Empire and gets the Order's privileges confirmed and extended. In 1217, Hermann joins the Fifth Crusade, an expedition meant to conquer Egypt, the power center of the Ayyubid Sultanate. During the Third Crusade in the 1190s, Richard the Lionheart envisioned a conquest of Egypt, which would enable the Christians to hold Jerusalem long term. The Fifth Crusade is meant to put that plan into effect. Launched from Crusader-controlled Cyprus, the army of the Fifth Crusade besieges Damietta, the port that guards the Nile Delta. Although he commands only a few knights, Hermann stands out among the leadership council of the crusade. Ultimately, the Fifth Crusade ends in failure, but over the course of the campaign, Hermann wins many donations and privileges for his order. Many blame the failure of the Fifth Crusade on the Holy Roman Emperor. Friedrich II failed to personally bring aid to the Crusaders in their hour of need. But Hermann maintained strict loyalty to the Emperor throughout this criticism. He knows well that his plans for his order's expansion will require the Emperor's goodwill. During the 1220s, Hermann accompanies Friedrich on imperial business, demonstrating his competence as a diplomat. When the Emperor announces his plans to at last lead his own crusade, Hermann seizes the opportunity to promote the Teutonic Order as the leading force in the German Crusader effort. During the Sixth Crusade, which is led by Friedrich II, the Teutonic Knights provide a large contingent in support of the Emperor. Throughout the crusade, Hermann proves to be a crucial diplomatic and military resource for the Emperor. After long negotiations with the Sultan of Egypt, Friedrich achieves a questionable surrender of Jerusalem, leaving the Holy City insecurely in Christian hands. But in terms of the Holy Roman Empire's relations with the Templars, the Hospitallers, and the local barons of the Crusader states, the crusade is a disaster. Friedrich ignores the laws of the Crusader states and attempts to force imperial rule, which provokes resistance from the nobles and military orders resident in the Holy Land. Hermann avoids antagonizing the local powers, and thus spares the Teutonic Knights reprisals after the Emperor departs. By now, no man is closer to the Emperor, whether as advisor or as friend, than Hermann von Salza. It's a remarkable rise for the son of the humblest of knightly families. Also, by now, the Teutonic Order has grown considerably. In addition to being generously rewarded by Friedrich II, the Knights are attracting donations from across Christendom. After his experiences in the Fifth and Sixth Crusades, Hermann has come to the conclusion that his order's future likely does not lie primarily in the Holy Land. He's received an intriguing offer from Duke Conrad of Masovia, whose Polish borderlands are suffering raids from the pagans of the Prussian wilderness. Duke Conrad wants Teutonic Knights on his frontier as a buffer against Prussian raids. Hermann responds favorably, dispatching a contingent of knights to establish a presence in Prussia. By now, crusading is already well underway in the Baltic North, but no large military order has yet entrenched itself on this front. Already, Hermann is beginning to contemplate the idea of a major Teutonic effort in the area. We'll learn more about this in the next video. The year is 1274. The Teutonic Knights, a powerful order of Christian warrior monks, maintain a tenuous rule over the remote frontier of Prussia. The territory is the main battleground of the Northern Crusades, an effort by Latin Christendom to subdue and Christianize the pagan Baltic and other northeastern regions. The Teutonic Knights have just defeated the greatest challenge to their rule, the Great Prussian Uprising, which lasted some 15 years. Although the uprising has been crushed, the Teutonic Order is left battered and short of funds and men. No longer can the Order launch large-scale campaigns. Now, they must make use of guerrilla tactics, sallying forth in lightning raids from their network of castles. With the Great Uprising ended, two of the most important Prussian tribes, the Natangians and the Bartians, have submitted to the Knights. But one Prussian tribe remains defiant of the Teutonic brothers, the Sudovians. The Sudovians are quite numerous, and their young men are reared as capable warriors. The Sudovian territories lay far to the east, amid impenetrable swamps and forests. The Sudovians announced their defiance by attacking the work crews rebuilding Bartenstein an important Teutonic castle in central Varsha. The Sudovians kill all the men and set fire to the site. This is a serious blow to the Teutonic brothers, as Bartenstein is a key point in their defensive line along the dangerous frontier. The man leading the Sudovians is a shrewd and bold tribal chieftain, Skumond. Sudovian raids spread terror across Teutonic-controlled territory. But in 1276, Skumond suffers several setbacks when his smaller raiding parties are defeated by Teutonic counterattacks. Determined to overcome the Brother Knights, Skumond forges an alliance with the Lithuanians. In 1277, he leads a large Sudovian-Lithuanian coalition through Kulm to Marienwerder and finally into Pagasania, burning villages all along the way. Skumond has struck right at the heart of the Teutonic state, demonstrating the inability of the Order to protect its territories. This prompts another tribal group, the Pagasanians, long pacified by the Order, to suddenly rebel. The Teutonic Knights are in a difficult position. They manage to suppress the rebellious Pagasanians, but they lack the numbers for a large-scale offensive against the Sudovians. However, they develop a plan to undermine Skumond. But in 1276, Scuman suffers several setbacks when his smaller raiding parties are defeated by Teutonic counterattacks. Determined to overcome the Brother Knights, Scuman forges an alliance with the Lithuanians. In 1277, he leads a large Sudovian-Lithuanian coalition through Kulm to Marienwerder and finally into Pagasania, burning villages all along the way. Scuman has struck right at the heart of the Teutonic state, demonstrating the inability of the Order to protect its territories. This prompts another tribal group, the Pagasanians, long pacified by the Order, to suddenly rebel. The Teutonic Knights are in a difficult position. They manage to suppress the rebellious Pagasanians, but they lack the numbers for a large-scale offensive against the Sudovians. However, they develop a plan to undermine Scuman. Small war parties are launched into Sudovia, where the Brother Knights brutally devastate local chieftains to discourage them from maintaining ties to Scuman. One interesting character from this period of guerrilla warfare is Martin von Galen, a freebooter who participates in the Sudovian raids. A riveting account from the Chronicles describes a raid typical of this period. Notice how Martin has both Germans and native Prussians in his warband. With 4 Germans and 11 Prussians, Martin attacked a certain village in Sudovia, killing or capturing the people. And on the long return trip, he came to a place where he sat eating with his friends, resting fearlessly after their labors, when the enemy burst among them. They killed his 4 German comrades, while the others fled, leaving there all their arms and food. The Sudovians rejoiced greatly over this. Meanwhile, Martin angrily circled in the woods and brought together his surviving comrades. Since they had lost all their weapons, he slipped among the enemy while they slept and stole their swords, shields, and spears. And when he had them, he went to his hidden companions, and they quietly killed all those they found, except one who tried to flee, and Martin killed him. Then they took up their original booty and the arms and other things that the pagans had brought with them, and returned home. Over the winter of 1280, the Teutonic Marshal, Conrad the Younger, leads a particularly devastating raid that penetrates regions previously untouched by the Christians. Meanwhile, the Order is having success in other ways as well. Sudovian chieftains, unable to endure the Order's raids, are surrendering one after another. However, the Order is turning these chieftains into allies by granting them lordships and feudal rights in their territories. Scuman finds himself running out of allies. In 1281, the Teutonic master of Prussia, Mangold von Sternberg, leads an attack against Scuman's home fortress, slaying the inhabitants. Increasingly, the knights are capable of capturing any pagan fort they wish. During this period, a young brother knight by the name of Louis von Liebenzell is captured by Scuman and lives to tell the tale. His account of his experience as Scuman's prisoner provides incredible insight into life among the Sudovians. When Louis fell into the hands of the foe, he was brought in bonds to Scuman and told that he had been selected to fight against an opponent equal to him. Scuman meant this to be humorous and kept Louis near him. One day it happened that Scuman went to where the noble Sudovians assembled, as was the custom, and took Louis with him in a friendly way, even though he was a prisoner. And in the drinking there arose such a quarrel that a mighty noble, a Sudovian, angered Louis with his sharp words that he was using in an insulting and threatening way. So Louis spoke to Scuman. "Did you bring me here with the intention of having him use such evil words so he can insult me and threaten me?" And Scuman said, "You shall see that I am sorry that he is bothering you, and if you have the courage to revenge your wrong, I will stand by you no matter what." And when he heard this, Louis pulled out his sword in anger and cut down that Sudovian in front of them all, so that he died. Later, Louis was cut free from his bonds by a youth who was a member of Scumand's retinue and led away to the brothers. In 1282, the Teutonic Order receives aid from the Poles when the Polish Prince Leszek the Black leads an enormous army into Sudovia and Lithuania. Over the course of weeks, he crushes 2 pagan armies in battle. The next year, 1283, when the Teutonic Knights invade Sudovia, they encounter little resistance. Louis von Lebenzell arranges for the peaceful surrender of around 1,600 Sudovians who had befriended him. These people are resettled in the West, given new lands in the Teutonic state. Even Scumand, now an aging, tired veteran, surrenders. The order forgives Scumand for his past rebellions, granting him lands near Balga, where he dies peacefully a few years later. Although an enemy, Scumand is admired by the Teutonic Knights as a worthy adversary. The Teutonic chroniclers pass down remarkably positive accounts of his life and deeds.